Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Pete Wright, and I'm here with Dane Christensen.
Hello.
And Megan Strand.
Hey.
And we are the Naked Marketers, and thank you so much for downloading the show today. We really appreciate it. Visit www.thenakedmarketers.com to download or listen to the show, and make sure to subscribe to the show in iTunes. It's free, and it's the best way to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Today on the show, we have an absolutely fantastic guest. We are lucky and deeply honored, shall I say, deeply honored to have the founding developer of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, has agreed to join us and talk a little bit about WordPress, what WordPress does to the publishing community, and what is in store for WordPress as a platform for telling your story on the web. It is a great discussion about getting your website out there in a way that's easy and can enable even more people in your organization to take part in your own story. So we're hang on. We'll get through the drivel that comes from the three of us next, and then we'll have the Matt Mullenweg interview.
And then we'll blow the podcast world away.
We will blow the podcast world away. That is absolutely true. And that's it for the morning plug. How are you guys?
Fabulous.
Do you hear that? There's a boat. There's a horn of a boat in the background.
I actually don't hear that. And I was going to say, I am tired this morning because I don't like Peter on East Coast time. He's like all chipper and happy, and I'm still drinking coffee.
I know, it's totally noon. I am ready for lunch.
You're going to have a glass of wine soon.
It's 1 o'clock, around 4 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock, and that's when we hit the porch. We're here in Chautauqua, New York at the Chautauqua Institution, and it's, you know what, can I just tell you? It's photography week at Chautauqua.
Awesome.
And the folks who have come across, I mean, you know, as a photographer, I go gaga over these guys. I'm a complete fanboy. And Steve McCurry is a guy I've just idolized for many years. I mean, this guy's images have been in my head for years. He's the guy who took the famous Afghan girl image with the striking blue eyes that was on the cover of National Geographic.
Love that picture.
It's so famous. So I mean, his portraits are just totally iconic, and he's so he gave a wonderful talk, and you know, more than anything else, I got to shake his hand and and just, you know, tell him how great he is.
Did you geek out?
I totally geeked out.
Did you go
fanboy? Ed Cashy is another one who is, I mean, these are guys who are real. I mean, they've spent their years chronicling, you know, real strife and struggle around the world. And Ed Cashy said something that was so terrific. I mean, here's a guy who has spent his time, you know, documenting for decades the Kurds and Kashmir and you know, Jerusalem. And I mean, he's just been dealing with struggle and documenting struggle through images. And he said, you know, I get this guy who comes up to me and he says, you know, you were here in Afghanistan 10 years ago, a guy just like you. And he asked me to take my picture because it would help raise awareness and my life would change. And my life hasn't changed. Why should I let you take my picture? And he said, you know, at first I was like, wow, I don't know. I don't know why you should. But then after I collected myself, I said, you know what? If you'd stop letting guys like me take your picture, then you'll lose the entire drumbeat of the conversation. My job is to keep that drumbeat going so that more and more people will recognize and be aware of what trouble is really happening in your world, because they don't get to see it. And if you close that curtain completely, then it's gone forever. And I really resonated with that. I mean, it was such a powerful message, and it just kind of, you know, you get so stuck in, I think in all careers, probably you get this, where you just get this sort of myopic, and I think so much about ad photography and how can I, you know, use my work to, you know, sell things and tell stories that help people sell things and sell image. And these are guys who have almost completely let go of that, and you know, they really use their work to tell a higher story. And it was just such a powerful reminder of you know, other uses of the medium. It was really incredible.
That's amazing.
Sorry to be so deep when you guys
it's
so
amazing.
It's
an amazing place. So we would look forward to more reports of fabulousness from Chautauqua.
But we do have news this week, don't we?
We do have some news.
We have some news.
Let's
talk about it. Let's talk about Old Spice.
Okay, so I'm excited about Old Spice because it worked. There's been this big brouhaha.
You don't have that smell of sweat anymore? What do you mean?
That Old Spice worked for you, Megan? Is that what you're
awesome.
saying?
I did not actually buy any Old Spice.
Strong enough for a man, used by a few women.
Yeah, I don't think that's a different brand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. It works, though.
Talk
Old
about why it worked.
Old Spice, their sales have increased 55% over the past 3 months, and then in just the past month alone, they reported 107% sales increase over their, I'm sorry, for their Old Spice body wash sales. So that's very exciting, and it's just been everywhere.
It's very
So
exciting.
it was funny because some of the earlier reports referenced a drop in their sales, a 7% drop, but that was for a different product, the Red Zone After Hours, which I have no idea even what that is.
That's right. Maybe if Old Spice guy would have mentioned the red zone after hours, it would have gone up 107%.
Maybe it would have, and maybe
Well,
we
can
would know
you
what it was.
why do you okay, so just to recap though, for those who haven't, and I'm here in Chautauqua, I'm here with my in-laws and they hadn't seen the Old Spice guy. I mean, you think we get it's so insular. We think, "Oh, everybody's seen the Old Spice guy." What exactly was the campaign?
Well, they did some YouTube videos with the Old Spice guy. And Peter, you can talk
Not
about
the actual Old Spice guy, which is an old sailor with a blue captain's hat
this
on.
very sexy black man.
What was his name? Isaiah
Isaiah Mustafa?
Mustafa, I think his name was. He's a retired running back. I think I just
Mustafa.
read.
Yeah. And it was done by Wyden and Kennedy, and they just had these phenomenal viral videos that transported him from, dropping out of the sky onto a horse to, riding. I can't even remember what the original videos were.
Well,
They were
and
amazing. And
there were three, and they were originally for broadcast. I think. I mean, they got more traction online, but I think they were originally part of the TV campaign.
right.
The
And then
"I'm on
they
a
hit,
horse" ad.
I'm on a horse. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're right. So it was
Super Bowl. It
TV
was
and then
Super Bowl.
YouTube. And so you're right. That's where it started.
Yeah.
And now, just recently, he started recording these based on tweets. He started recording these very customized, individual, very short video clips on YouTube addressing these Twitter users. And the Twittersphere went crazy with these videos, and they did very good job targeting sort of high profile and interesting people. And so I think that's probably what the 107% increase was on
You know
Twitter.
what I think
Well,
the lesson is there? What I like so much about it. I mean, the one thing is, yes, they got huge distribution of a very clever ad. And again, if you haven't seen it, search for Old Spice "I'm on a horse" on YouTube and watch this ad. It's brilliant. But what I think is so powerful and what probably was so illustrative of their success is responsiveness to the people. The
Exactly.
people started tweeting to this Old Spice account, and the Wyden and Kennedy team, the creative team, and Mustafa got together in studio and recorded almost real time 75 video responses in a day. And those were the video responses they were uploading almost in real time. So people would tweet, and within an hour, there'd be a video response from the Old Spice guy. And I think that level of kind of commitment to the message is that's what's novel here. I think there's a lot that isn't novel. There's a lot that's just clever and creative, but that level of responsiveness really is novel.
that's perfect, Pete. And that's the thing this will be. This is sort of interesting news, in the advertising or the business section of a paper. But I can tell you, the boardrooms of the big Madison Avenue ad agencies are having all kinds of brainstorming sessions here because, on the one hand, you have advertising in a time of a down economy when not everything is working beautifully. But here's one that, on the surface, didn't cost a ton. This is pretty low tech, pretty low cost production. I mean, just in terms of the technology and the broadcast of it, but blew up product sales in a very measurable way. So this is getting a ton of attention. And there are going to be a lot of attempts, not that there haven't been before, but I think we're going to see a lot more attempts to try to recreate this for different brands and try to capture that magic. And, mostly it's like quirky. How do you make it viral? How do you make it funny? How do you address a very specific target audience, which is partly, I think, why the Old Spice ads worked. They were good at hitting a demographic. But Pete, you're right that without that critical element of being interactive and pulling the audience in and feeding, I think, the need that consumers have because of what we've grown accustomed to with social media and comment boards and review sections on product sites on Amazon, et cetera. But the ability to sort of interact in some way and be part of it. It really will be interesting over the next few years to see how different products and companies are able to do that successfully. But I think I think there's a huge demand for that in order to really have successful campaigns.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think they just really illustrated it. I think your point is well taken, that they've sort of, raised the bar, so to speak. That, um, they've already done this level of responsiveness with videos to people's tweets, and so that won't be novel anymore. So
Right.
what's next? The
It,
Old Spice guy is actually going to show up to your house. Uh,
and there's
I
not a
would love
formula.
that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would. The, the funny thing is or the interesting thing is there's not a formula here that will be, I think, easy to replicate. What I really think we'll see are a lot of fails over
yeah,
the next year or two. I think
And they are going to be funny.
yeah, they
yeah, I
are.
think there'll be a lot of examples of, wow, that didn't work. Wow. But,
Boy, they
that'll be
tried to
fun.
be responsive and really did show up to somebody's house and were arrested in the
Okay, well
process. And
that's been done. It's called Publishers Clearinghouse,
that's right. Oh, that's a good point.
but they
Yeah,
come with a lot of money, so
come with a lot of
that's
money. That makes
maybe
up for it.
And that was never real time, or maybe one primetime special it was. But geez, publishers, they could take off on that one. Make it real time, put it on the web. Anyway, yeah, it's going to be, I think it really will be very interesting to see. What we know for sure is that this Wyden and Kennedy raising the bar here with Old Spice is absolutely not the end of attempts to do viral campaigns similar to this one. And it'll
Right.
be very interesting to see who does it well, where the bar goes, how this evolves, and who really fails at it. Be very interesting to watch.
Who really fails? Who
Yeah.
fails bestest?
Gonna
That
be
was the
fun.
bestest failure ever.
Well, there
Uh,
really are no
well,
failures like they're quite as gruesome as these sort of guerrilla viral marketing failures. Sometimes those can
true.
be truly horrible.
Gruesome and embarrassing. We speaking of gruesome failures. Although I don't think the jury is completely back in on this yet, but the Times of London, the Sunday Times, has lost not almost 90% of its online readership, according to a recent aggregation of data. I don't know if you can
Ugh.
call it a survey, but it's not looking terribly good. And this is, I know we have a lot of publishing to talk about, and so we'll kind of make this quick. But the bottom line is, uh, last year Rupert Murdoch came out and said, you know what, this advertising thing, people are changing the way they get content. We can't. We're not making any money. The bottom's falling out of the newspaper industry. So we're going to put up a paywall in front of our Times UK website. So if you want to get in, you have to pay, and it's like £2 a week if you subscribe to the Times and the Sunday Times
That's
online.
expensive.
It seems
It's
expensive.
like what, $5 or $6 a week?
I think that's
More like
about it.
three or
But
four.
if you get, they have very strange money abroad. So I don't know. I think there is some value to paying for content, and people will pay for good content, and they will also not pay for good content if marginal content is available for free elsewhere. And I sort of think that's probably what's happening here with the Times. That they've lost a lot of their online readership, which means, as a result, they've sacrificed a large percentage of their ad viewers, because this was a hybrid approach, right? You were going to pay to get in. There were still ads inside. So now the floor is falling out of the ad business as well. So, what does this mean? Have you guys had a chance to percolate on this?
I have.
Let's
I did just a
share.
slight amount of percolating here.
Do tell.
Well, a couple of things. One, I feel for the industry. I mean, I feel like I feel a little sad with what is a very logical statement you made, Peter, which is that people will go for free, of course, and if the quality isn't quite as good, or if they can, whatever. I mean, if it's just so much more convenient, they're going to go for free. And I feel like publications that truly have quality content and journalists and I don't want them to go away. I mean, I want them to really, have a good business model and exist, and I want to have access to them. But there's so many sort of logical points here, like, gosh, if I don't really want to throw out the money to have a single news source, because once you've put money towards it, you've kind of committed, really, right? I mean, if you're paying a subscription to a newspaper, then that's kind of, you're not going to probably pay 5 or 10. You're not going to browse a bunch of different news sources if you've kind of committed money in a direction. That's a hard thing to do when we're talking about the online environment. The other thing is, these papers lose in a lot of ways when they start doing this. They lose with search engine optimization and people driving traffic to their sites by linking these great stories. So there's, it's not an easy question, really. And I don't know how much their revenue model really needs to change. I don't know all those answers, but they lose a lot when they put up a firewall relative to driving high amounts of traffic and having broad readership. Whether they make that up in the subscriptions they get, I uh, I hope something works out.
Yeah. Good luck, Times.
Good luck.
No, I think there's definitely, I mean, there's something there, and part of it may actually be that more major publishers need to do this. I mean, the New York Times has gone back and forth, and it seems they've made a strategic decision to remain the paper of record, and to your point, to allow people to deep link into their content area and make sure that if you want to find out the facts of a story and post it on your blog, you end up posting links back to the New York Times, and that's kind of been a mainstay of research on the net, and the Times has just turned that off. They've strategically gone the other way, and
And
I
it's not
think
just blogs. I mean, with the growth in things like Facebook and Twitter, even
right.
Twitter is a place that people will absolutely push a link to a story
Right.
all day long, and it can drive massive amounts of traffic if you don't have a
Right.
paywall.
Right.
So is this just a question? Was this a UK experiment or?
Well, the Times is,
They've done it
no, I mean,
before.
they've done it before, but Murdoch said, he owns a lot of properties around the world, and he has said this is where they're starting. And so
Okay.
they started with the Times, and it's going to come elsewhere.
And Murdoch is
But
by
we'll see.
far the most clueless, literally, I'm not just making an assumption here, literally on the record as being clueless about search engine optimization and how the internet actually works.
Well,
You should
that's
help
a
them
fair
with that,
point.
Dane.
He's
He is on the
unhelpable.
record. That is a true thing. He is on the
Like,
record.
the
That's
guy doesn't
bizarre to
even
me.
use a computer, really, right?
Yeah,
I think
right.
he's actually on the record with something like that as well. Like, he really just sort of these kids and blah blah blah. Like, he'll say statements like that. Not that he's a dumb guy. I'm not saying this man isn't smart, can't run a business, but
Off my
literally,
lawn! Get off my lawn!
literally doesn't understand. Like, he accuses Google of basically riding on his back by posting links to stories on his media sites. So
Right.
if Google posts in Google News, a Wall Street Journal story, which they don't do anymore because of the paywall, or Fox News, Google's essentially driving traffic back to those sites. But in Murdoch's mind, it's like, well, Google, man, we wrote that story and they've got it on Google. What are they doing with that? Like, literally, that's how he thinks about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Crazy, I tell you.
I think his Wall Street Journal paywall will probably work for him. I'm not sure any others will.
Yeah.
With their
It'll
media
change the
sites.
tone and tenor of the journal, too. I mean, it becomes a different kind of publication. Anyhow, moving on. What else do we have to talk about?
Did we want to talk about the Forrester research, or were we
Sure.
going to skip right over that?
Now let's talk about it. It'll be a quick one. Because
Okay, quick.
who of you two are using Foursquare? Wait, let me guess. Megan.
And not me.
Okay. How do I even explain this?
Well, let me ask this.
I sort of use it because, and I will tell you the only reason I do is because I feel like if this takes off bigger than I think it will, specifically via Foursquare, I feel like I should at least be versed with it. So I use it maybe a handful of times a week. But I'm not checking into Trader Joe's.
I use the hell out of it. And
No,
I
you
use the
don't.
hell out
You're
of it. I
okay.
do. No, I do. I use it every day, multiple times a day. And I use it specifically, and I don't ever check in publicly because you can check in without shouting it to your friends. I use it to become the mayor of really obscure places, like
Like
the
my
street
house?
corner, like your house. Like I'm at a kiosk right now in the middle of a street. And you find there are people who are like me, who are checking into places like
What does that give you?
who are like stupid traffic on the highway. Check in.
No, you're like an obscure dog marking obscure territories.
So
That's
what
exactly
does
what
that
it
give
is.
you?
Nothing. It is a waste of my brain space. I totally acknowledge that. It's a total waste of space. Matter of fact, I quit Foursquare for a long time because it was
Yeah, I did
taking
too.
up too much space. And then I came back for the exact same reason you just described, and now I do it only because I want to see how many badges I can get. I am one of the people, in fact, who is devaluing the overall value of Foursquare. So I can't imagine it's going to last very long in my tool. I can't even call it a tool in my box of things that occupy me
Kind of
while
makes
I'm.
you seem like a
Yeah,
tool.
seems like it, doesn't it?
You need a tool belt. That's Christmas
Anyway, well,
present for.
okay, but
So,
there's an
but the
actual
point of
story
it
that
is,
goes with this is that Forrester Research issued a report, and really this little infographic that we'll put on the show notes pretty much captures it. 84% of people surveyed say, I am not familiar with such applications. And let's see, I
I
use
am
them
not from
weekly
this
or less
land.
frequently is 1%, so that would be me. And then here's your Peter. I use them more frequently than once a week. 1% U.S. online adults. So
That's right.
they're coming out and saying marketers should avoid advertising on Foursquare because not enough people use them. So that's
Right.
essentially the gist of the story and the research that came out. So I think the point of the article is that probably Facebook and Twitter may be in a better position to use geolocation services once they figure it out. So,
Well, and
Foursquare,
yeah,
Koala, Whirl, all these extra little.
I'll bet
Um,
Foursquare was big at Comic Con though.
oh, I'm
yeah.
sure it
Well,
was.
it's yeah at conferences, but I think that article and your comment there are actually absolutely right. I think if you add geolocation to Facebook, it will
Done.
take off. I mean, it will be the race will be won.
Although
Um,
I think there was another, I'm not sure if it was in this article or another one. The point was that Facebook, it was in this one. Facebook appears to have blown it, and they're talking about, the geolocation brouhaha has been around. Um, you know, the privacy issue, people robbing your house when you're reporting that you're not there.
mhm.
And so what they're saying is that Facebook sort of blown the privacy issue. So maybe they're not best placed to handle that location
Hmm.
component.
Yeah.
Well, they've
We'll
got
see.
other
Well,
sort of privacy eggs to fry right at the moment. So
Exactly.
they also have 500 million users.
Yeah, I think that was announced this week too.
That was
So
announced this week. So
it's more than a
I don't
few.
know, more than a few.
that's right.
Very interesting little bit of news. I don't know if it's very interesting. You guys weren't so sure how uniquely interesting this was. You, Pete, thought this was absolutely predictable to have happened, but we're able to say it out loud right now. Ebook sales on Amazon have just recently passed hardback sales on Amazon, and that's in spite of the fact that hardback sales are up. Um, and I guess another little fact, they've been selling hardbacks for 15 years. They've been selling Kindle books for 33 months or ebooks, however you want to call them. But yeah, the ebook sales are up and hardback sales are up. Ebook sales over hardback sales. I think it's interesting. And I think we were talking a little bit before we got on about this whole dynamic and about, ebook sales. And, we've mentioned already on the show a couple of issues with publishing and how things are changing there. And really, at the end of the day, when we get into these, who's up and who's down and what format are people after, I don't think you slice it 100 ways and still come up with the fact that people are reading more content more often from more sources than I think ever before in the history of the planet.
Boy, is that ever true. I mean, it's certainly
Amen.
true for me. Well, and I was a Kindle user. I was a fanatical Kindle user for about 17 days, and then the rumors
You
picked
were a
up
Kindle
about the
user longer
iPad.
than that.
Well, I was a fanatical Kindle user for 17 days. I was a Kindle user for about 3 months. And I eventually got tired of the slow performance and the slow page turns and I didn't like the grayscale, and the rumors picked up about some Apple tablet. I got very excited about that, and boy, I have read and I think the qualifying factor here is I have purchased more books, ebooks on the iPad, whether from Amazon as Kindle formatted ebooks or iBooks from the Apple iBook store than I have all in the past 5 years combined, which I have to imagine I'm not alone. But
That's
the,
the
the bottom
trend.
line is I really enjoy reading on these things, and I more than anything else I enjoy having all my books there at once.
I don't think I can do this show anymore because every time I get on, it makes me want to buy an iPad.
Well, then you should just buy an iPad and put yourself out of your
I know
misery.
there are more than one ways to solve that dilemma.
So anyway, maybe Maybe I'm different, but I sure love reading on my digital
Oh,
device.
that is such a perfect segue
Oh,
into the next
wow.
story.
Thank you. Well,
There you go, Dane.
I will tell you, yeah, Wired Magazine did a survey with my type, 20,000 people, and concluded that iPad owners tend to be wealthy, sophisticated, highly educated, and disproportionately interested in business and finance. All seem like good things, but also scoring terribly in the areas of altruism and kindness, 6 times more likely to be wealthy, well educated, power hungry, overachieving, sophisticated, unkind, and non altruistic 30 to 50-year-olds.
Wow, dude, you're like
That's
Richie Rich.
that's BS. Those my type people should be beaten about the head with iPads.
Yeah, I mean, 20,000 people, couldn't they
No.
have
That's
done
Well,
hilarious.
okay. Here's the
50,000?
one thing. First of all, probably there may be something to that, but I also think that the kind of people who take surveys like this are probably exactly the type of selfish elites that um, that have the time to stop reading their iPads and actually take stupid surveys like this.
Well, and also, we know this is true of demographic research. Take you know, any sort of demographic type that you can sort of corral in some way, and it's just not hard to come up with unflattering adjectives if you had to, right? I
Right,
mean,
right.
it's and who knows the questions, and I honestly, guys, this to me is very likely the exact same thing we talked about last week, and I think other times before, where you're doing your trending topic thing where
Yeah.
what's a trending topic? Well, the iPad is still hot. Let's do a story on the iPad. Well, how about this one? Let's have it be controversial. Yeah, we can do that.
Five ways the iPad can kill you while you sleep.
Exactly. We'll continue to see regurgitation on this kind of thing, as long as the product is hot or the topic is hot or the celebrity is hot. And you've got to have something controversial. The headline on this one: iPad users are selfish elites, study says. Who's not
That's
going to
right.
click on that and read it?
Exactly.
You did.
I
iPad,
did.
maniacal mechanical genius, is planning to take over the world.
But no one's going to click on, iPad users seem to be a lot like the rest of us with maybe a little more money because they could afford the device.
That's right. iPad users read books.
That story won't get clicks.
That's right.
Not only clicks,
Well,
but comments, which
I
are, a critical thing when you're talking about advertising revenue and online media.
indeed. And on that note, you know what I think we should do?
Bring the
Anybody?
smarts,
Bring the
perhaps?
Let's do it. Can
smarts.
we do that? Let's bring the smarts. Our guest to the show this week, we are just absolutely thrilled to have the good, talented Matt Mullenweg join us on the show. Matt is the founding developer of Wordpress, a tool, a platform that is close to many of our hearts, and behind many of the sites that allow us to communicate so effectively to our audiences to this very day. Matt, welcome to The Naked Marketers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very glad to be here.
I'd like to start because a lot of our audience may not be more on the technical side and understand what the back end of a website particularly looks like. I'd like to start if you just give us a little bit of a rundown on what WordPress is and how folks are using it today.
Sure. Well, when WordPress first started 7 or 8 years ago, it was a blogging system. I had my own blog. At the time, I was posting photos and sharing links and the stuff that personal bloggers do. And I was frustrated with the software. So I started working on things, and that eventually became WordPress in collaboration with some other folks around the world. As WordPress evolved, people loved the simplicity and ease of use so much that they wanted to use it not just for their blog, but for their whole website. And so that's the direction we started to go in probably about 3 years ago. And so today, people with WordPress 3.0, which is our most recent release, you can use it to run a blog, your entire website if you like. And people have made some really beautiful websites on it. And we recently merged some functionality that allowed you to run a whole blog network. So the software that we use to powerwordpress.com, which hosts, I think, 12 million blogs now, it's the same software that you can download and install with one click on almost any web host in the world.
Yeah, that's amazing, amazing growth in the last 7 years. Can you remember the first person you pitched WordPress to?
It was probably my friends. A lot of my friends who I'd gone to high school with, I kept in contact with that summer. And then as we all went our separate ways into college, we still remained really close. And so since in the beginning there weren't very many users of WordPress, I just set up blogs for all my friends. I think there were about 5 of them. And because none of them were particularly technical, I got very early feedback on the things that were too difficult or hard to understand.
And how does it transition? I'll tell you where I'm going here. So much of what we talk about on this show is about how organizations can engage the people that they need to take ownership of their brand and their process and the tools that they offer. How do you engage in the products more deeply and take more ownership of it? And so when I'm thinking about that transition of your efforts as sort of this solo developer developing this tool to run your own website, and you having to kind of pitch this to other developers to begin to take ownership, and then other developers working with you to pitch this as a tool that really can work for websites. I'm so interested in the key moments that allowed you to transition from you as a one-man development operation to Automatic, the company that sort of houses WordPress. Does that make sense?
Sure. So luckily, I was never all alone. I don't recommend doing anything alone, actually. From
Good
the very
advice. I
beginning,
like that.
when I was first thinking about WordPress, or thinking about actually, there's a predecessor software to WordPress called B2, which I was a user of, and that was an existing open source project. And I was thinking about doing a fork of that, and I blogged about this. And a guy named Mike Little left a comment on my blog saying, if I was serious about it, he'd like to work with me. And he's the co-founder of WordPress. We ended up working together on what became WordPress. The evolution of I have to correct you there because Automatic does not own or is not the parent of WordPress. They're actually completely separate. But the evolution was basically that, as Mike and I did things, we were just sort of, doing every possible job. We were writing the documentation, making the website, helping people out on the forums, everything. And I think that sort of early passion just inspired other folks to get involved because most people contribute to open source because it's fun. So when they see people having a good time and working on things they love, if it's an area they're also interested in, they'll just naturally gravitate toward contributing.
I'm sorry, we're breaking up on that last little bit. I want to make sure that I don't lose you here.
Oh, sorry, I said they just naturally gravitate towards contributing.
They naturally gravitate toward contributing. This is one of the comments you made on in a recent interview is a passage that really struck me, and I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on how this has played out for you. It's on this idea of collaboration. You said the first time I was really surprised by this community was when some users in Japan downloaded the software and replaced every English string with a Japanese translation. I installed it and it was surreal. All of the layout and buttons looked the same, but there was this beautiful exotic script gracing everything. It was like a dream where everything is familiar, but all your friends are speaking a language you don't understand. The idea that someone halfway across the world would contribute so much time and thought to the project was very humbling.
Oh, that's probably the most poetic thing I've heard in months. That's beautiful. That's just beautiful.
This idea that these people are contributing without your involvement directly at all at this point is a beautiful thing. What does that mean for you?
I think you just said it. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's
I
way
love
too
it.
easy.
Yeah, are we letting him get away with that? That's just so deep, actually, Pete. I hadn't read that passage actually.
All right. What does it mean for you that WordPress is free software? And I asked that question couched in the more sort of traditional kind of stereotyped MBA uh, uh, question, which is, when you say free software, it means free software, and how could you possibly ever make a dime on free software? And here you are, this team of people building these absolutely wonderful tools for other businesses to use, and you're giving it away.
And actually, Pete, can I follow that up with
Yeah.
just, I mean, Matt, I'm so curious. It's actually your most recent blog post on, it's mat.tt, and you've got this thing in parentheses, and this is what really piqued my interest in this, where you say, as a businessman myself, I think it's an excellent approach, sometimes regardless of license, to give away something for free or to do something no cost. And honestly, I teach a marketing class every now and then, and it's something that's never shown up in the textbooks yet. But of course, it really is a very interesting trend of freeware and free as a pricing model. Marketing textbooks haven't quite had come up with chapters yet on free as a pricing model, but it's actually become a very successful pricing model. I wouldn't, I wouldn't go into like, hey, Matt, we want to talk more deeply about that from a marketing perspective, other than you use the phrase here on this most recent post as a businessman myself. And so I really am following up on Pete, very curious in your feelings about free as a pricing model.
Sure. So I'll answer those in order. When we talk about WordPress being free software, we're actually doing kind of a geeky thing where the free is not about the price. It's about freedom. So they say free as in freedom, not as in beer. And so open source and the GPL license that WordPress is under in particular has sort of its own bill of rights. There's certain things that sort of inalienable rights that no one can take from you that govern the things you can and cannot do with the software. So for example, you can use it for any purpose, commercial or non-commercial. You can say anything you like. I can't tell you what you can or cannot say on your blog. You can modify it, you can redistribute it, you can give it to your friends. There's sort of a lot of things you can do, which we take for granted because this is becoming a lot more popular. Open source is really becoming ubiquitous. But the vast majority of software in the world is under a proprietary license, which doesn't allow you to do this. So that's what we talk about. The free that I'm really most passionate about is that. Price is a different approach. I think it's probably best expounded in Chris Anderson's latest book, which was called Free. Have you guys had a chance to read that?
Yes. Yeah, it's a terrific read. Whether or not you agree with it, it is a terrific read.
Yeah, and so for any listeners who are curious about the concept, he can describe it much better than I could. But how it works in the WordPress world is probably, the business analogy would be, giving away the razors and selling the razor blades. The core platform is free and open and available to lots and lots of people. And how folks make money around it is just services. So sometimes that's hosting. So for example, the millions of web hosts in the world, or WordPress.com, which is one that Automatic runs. It's in, one of the first services I made was called the Kismet, which is the anti-spam service. You can sell designs or consulting or, there's just almost anything around it. But basically what you do is you assume the code itself is a commodity. And so how can you create value? How do you assume that that's ubiquitous? Sort of target economics of abundance versus economics of scarcity with regards to the code and get as many copies of the code as possible and then sort of create value from that abundance.
You do kind of speak poetically, Matt.
He
really
does.
like that.
It's super impressive. Well, and this kind of leads to my question. You had responded to somebody's I think it was a comment on a post with an entire blog post of your own about, you say in this comment, through the freedom intrinsic in the GPL that has allowed people to abuse WordPress, it has allowed even more people to do amazing things. And over time, the good far outweighs the bad. And then you go on to say, if you accept that the bad people are going to be bad, then the real question becomes, how do you maximize the effect of the good instead of treating them just like the bad? And that is such a powerful philosophy to me. And I think it's sort of the crux of what happens, especially from a marketing perspective, this, opening it up and being okay with the fact that not everyone's going to use it for good. But that if you're supporting the people that are doing the good work with it, that outweighs the bad. So I have two questions around that. And my first is that, are you seeing that becoming more of a common philosophy, or is that still pretty rare in your mind? And then my other question is that ever hard for you? I mean, do you ever have days where you're like, yeah, that's my philosophy, but man, today that's hard?
Well, first of all, you have to send me a link to that because I don't remember saying that, but it's pretty good.
It's very poetic. I'm happy to send you the link.
Yeah, certainly that is what I believe. It's a good characterization of it. And some days it is hard. I mean, absolutely. Because, WordPress is at its core just a tool, so it can be used for good things and bad things. And it breaks your heart a little bit when it's used for bad things. But it's kind of like that, you hear the phrase like, I might not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend your right to say it. And so that's sort of the approach I try to take when I see WordPress being used in ways that I would not personally endorse. Um, I'm happy to contribute to an environment when people are able to express themselves in that way. And in fact, one of the core philosophies and goals of WordPress has always been to democratize publishing, to open it up to the masses. And there's going to be, all sorts in there.
That brings up one of the sort of fascinating positions that in watching your interaction with these core publics, the WordPress development community, the WordPress theme community, the WordPress, the legal community that exists underlying these different approaches to licensing, and then of course the business community that exists on top of it. You really have become something of a celebrity. If that's the right word, a celebrity endorser of the GPL, and a, a major kind of voice box for this free software, open software community, and that seems to put you in kind of an interesting crossroads of arguments that continue to exist and flourish online about how people use WordPress, how people are allowed to use WordPress, and those who have gone south on some of WordPress's core beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
What is your impression of the general state of the WordPress economy? Do you feel like your efforts to really set the standard and be the standard bearer of how WordPress is used really it has come to fruition, or does it equate what you always wanted it to look like?
Yeah, and I should probably do some background for listeners who aren't familiar with it. Remember, I talked earlier about the freedoms that the GPL affords. The only restriction in the GPL, it's a big one, but it is the only restriction, is that things you create on top of GPL software can't take away any of these freedoms. So where that pops up in the community is, people creating plugins or themes. Their software has to be licensed in a way that protects the user the same way that WordPress does. Because otherwise, GPL software would be highly exploitable, because you could have, just a core, but all the useful functionality could be on add-ons that completely ignore the user freedoms, and that would sort of defeat the purpose. For better or worse, the GPL is an older license. I think it was done like in 1990, 1991. I was 6 or 7 years old at the time. So it was really created for a different world. They didn't anticipate the web in a lot of ways, or how people distribute software and use software and things like that. So if you try to, you can find ways around the wording of the license pretty easily, so it won't apply to you. But what's most interesting to me is just this idea of, you get, take a penny, leave a penny. You get something wonderful for free that a lot of people have worked on, and whatever you build on it, you also give back so other people can build on what you've done. And that way you sort of have a very rich commons of this intellectual property that we all invest a lot in, but is sort of a shared resource and gets better and better and better over time, better than any of us could ever do individually. It's tricky, and it's one of those things that works in practice but not in theory, because you can ask lots of questions like, why would anyone contribute to this? How do these communities survive? There's lots of things that come up, but they do. And that's where, to me, at the very beginning, I didn't really anticipate I didn't know anything about running an open source project. I probably didn't even understand open source as well as I do today. But once I experienced it, like I talked about the Japanese story or other things, it's infectious, because you're just part of something so much larger than yourself. And I find that very fulfilling. And I think that's honestly one of the reasons that a lot of people contribute, because you really feel like you're part of something.
What does that look like in terms of just general control? I mean, you say you've learned a lot of lessons about running an open source project, and it strikes me that one of the interesting parallels. I mean, if you look at running an open source project versus running a traditional managerial organization, is this idea of what you have control over and that which you have absolutely no control. Does that resonate at all for you? Is it something you can share some thoughts on?
No, not directly. I mean, I think it's a balance like anything else. I think that even in a hierarchical, corporate setting, you might have the illusion of control, but really, if all you have is a stick to motivate people, you're not going to get very much done. So I think in corporations, it works much the way that open source does, where you're motivating people by, sort of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think are the three principles Dan Pink talks about in Drive. Um, those things I think are pretty universal in people's work, whether it's for profit or for not.
And Matt, I mean, I'm also curious, and I don't know if this is quite a follow-up to Pete. Maybe it's not, but
Clearly nobody understands my questions today. Right?
You're
So
too deep.
Pete made no sense at all, but let me try this one. I'm reading through your blogs or have been, and I just think, wow, Matt is such a thoughtful person and such a insightful person, just in terms of the stuff that you put on. It's kind of random. I mean, you've got quotes, amazing quotes, like inspirational kind of thoughts. You've got like random things that happen to you. You've got just kind of an array of things that you put up on your blog. And I read through it and I think, I'm kind of curious because I'm probably just slightly older than you, Matt. But do you think it's sort of a personality type that is more willing to sort of share openly online? Do you think it's something that people have to kind of grow accustomed to, or do you think it's maybe in some sense generational, that maybe people who grew up in a different generation are just maybe never going to quite be as open and free with sharing themselves online as a younger person might be?
Yeah, I think that online is just, people love communicating and telling their friends what's going on, and that's, as old as humanity. So the fact that people are doing that through blogs or through Twitter or through these new mediums, I don't think is too unique. I do see something generational, though, where the concept of it being online, this sort of public-private space at the same time, where things are public, but you're kind of obscure, so like the whole world isn't at your door, but they could be tomorrow, and this sort of,
Right.
it's an odd construct. That probably is generational, whether you're comfortable with it or not. And a generation growing up on Facebook and with Friendster and all the other things, I think is a lot more comfortable putting things online. I remember 10, 15 years ago, you'd be a little scared about putting your credit card into your computer, and now we don't even think twice about it and do it probably 10 times a week. So
We don't,
those
but our
things are just
grandparents might.
yeah. But
Even today.
ultimately, the best bloggers are just storytellers, is really what it comes down to. And so I think anyone who loves telling stories is going to make an excellent blogging candidate.
That's a good point, actually. I heard, I think it's Heather Armstrong that does the Deuce blog, had a really interesting NPR interview a while ago where she talked about the difference between journalists writing for newspapers versus bloggers, and how you kind of have to get in a different gear to say, and along the lines of being a storyteller, but you have to be comfortable with the fact that there isn't sort of an editorial filter between what you're going to think and what you're going to publish. And I still sort of I mean, I think your response to me was just made perfect sense, that maybe there is a little bit of generational influence, but that there's not a new there's not really like a sort of a new evolution of humanity here. There's just kind of a new way of sharing. I think that's
Yeah,
great.
I'm usually pretty skeptical when someone suggests something brand new, because we don't really do brand new things that often.
I
I
think
think
you're
we,
right.
we stopped doing brand new in 1941. I think January. January, everything new changed.
No, but it's a great point, Matt. It's a great point.
Matt, I want to take it back to focus a little bit on businesses and how how organizations are communicating to their own publics. Who are the as you look at various sites and implementations of WordPress, who do you see who's really doing it well as an organization, really engaging their publics? How are you seeing this hitting the mainstream?
That's I don't honestly don't have a good answer for that because WordPress is used to power so many different types of websites now. There's not really something intrinsic about using the tool that makes you better or worse at talking to your audience. Um, they're almost orthogonal.
Hmm. That's interesting. As someone who is, working with organizations to, to help install WordPress and actually build these communities, we're seeing so much wonderful, so many wonderful features built in to help you actually do just that. Um, I don't know if it's a bit of a surprise to me that you haven't seen one, or that you don't have much notice of those that are really outstanding.
And maybe I just take it for granted now. I don't know.
When it's in the blood, right? When it's in the blood. What you are on the record of saying that you want to bring more social to WordPress in the future. What does that look like? How is this? What is the next big thing for WordPress, and how is it going to be different than allowing us to just build our own white labeled Facebook?
Hmm. Well, I think the obvious thing is that you now have these sort of social reading platforms where people get and consume a lot of their content. So it just makes sense for your blog post to push to these. So, the two obvious examples of when you do a new blog post, it should post to your Facebook and it should post to your Twitter because that's where your friends are, and so your content should be there too. The cool thing about this is that um, Twitter obviously has its limitations, and Facebook doesn't want to host all your content. So when people see your links, they'll come back to your website, which is really nice because you want them engaging with you, if at all possible, on your domain, on some place where you can control and create a tailored user experience that isn't within the very narrow confines of what something like Facebook, Twitter, or really any social network gives you.
That's great.
So that's sort of the obvious first pass. In terms of using WordPress to power a social network itself, this is something we've been doing experimentation with, both on WordPress.com, with introducing new features around consuming content, and with a project we have called BuddyPress, which is basically a social layer you can put on top of WordPress, which adds all the traditional social network features, so like profiles, groups, or private messaging, galleries, activity streams, all those sorts of good things. Um, I'm not really there. I think that it's interesting that we can allow anyone to run their own social network, and there's a lot of use cases for that. But in most cases, the utility of the social network comes from all your friends also being on it, at least until we or someone else figures out a really cool distributed way of doing this. You're going to have economies of scale where we're all going to be on Facebook because we're all on Facebook.
Right.
And so I don't see that changing in the short term, as in the next 2 to 3 years. Um, in terms of what I think of, like you have search engine optimization, you want social optimization. I think we're going to learn a lot of what's the best way to put your content into these platforms, and when and how, and how do you optimize your content for these different experiences, because they're more contextual when someone's on, especially for marketing, because when people are on something like a Facebook, they're not looking to buy something. They have no intent like they do in a search engine. They're browsing, they're talking to friends, they're looking at pictures of cute girls. I mean, how do you interact with that environment? You have to approach it very differently.
That's such a terrific comment. I particularly like this idea of the comment on the the use of a social network. If you're the only one using a fax machine, suddenly the utility of the fax machine goes down fairly dramatically. We're dealing with this. I'm seeing a lot of this in clients who are moving from one social network to the next and realizing that portability is a fairly massive issue. And I think it goes to this discussion of businesses who are trying to build their own, networks. How do you lure someone away to have a very narrow niche discussion on your own social network when all of these users are already on a network that meets all of their needs? And yet, what BuddyPress has done is really fascinating, and I so wish more people would use it because it's great. It's such a great way to add to your site. One of the things that we do each week on the show is we talk about our favorite tool that we're using that week to help build communication. We thought of course this week we're going to be talking more about WordPress, but thought we'd offer it to you. Do you have a favorite tool or plugin that lays on top of WordPress that you like, knowing that you're someone who probably lives more in the core than others?
It might be inclined to recommend Akismet.
You might be
Yeah,
inclined, but are there any out there that you really like to hang your hat on and would recommend others explore?
I have been experimenting with more plugins lately. Some of them have been so there's. I'll talk about the things that we don't build first. There's this guy named Otto, Otto, who I actually work with now. He helps me with my site sometimes, who's written great plugins for connecting your blog to Facebook and Twitter and all these other places. So I've noticed just traffic on my own site has gone up a lot since I started using these auto-publish tools. So those I would definitely recommend.
What are these?
Uh,
Are auto publish?
His name is Otto, so
Oh,
just if
okay.
you look for OTTO on the WordPress plugin directory,
All right.
you'll see a ton there. The other ones, I have a lot of, especially business-wise, a lot of interest. And so how my company Automatic has evolved is really to do maybe too many things. But we have a lot of different services, including PoleDaddy, Gizmit, VaultPress is the latest we just launched. But there's really too many to talk about. But if you go to automatic.com, which is AUTOMATTIC, on the homepage there, there's actually a link to each of the services and a little haiku that describes each one. So I think if folks check that
That's
out,
cool.
they would find some cool stuff. The top ones are sort of the commercial services like WordPress.com, and then there's a whole set at the bottom which are not-for-profit or open source projects which we contribute to.
Which
Very
are
good.
fantastic. And I should say, as timely as it is, congrats on the launch of VaultPress. It is a
Thank you.
terrific service. Do you want to plug it just a little bit more detail?
Yeah, basically the idea is that now that people are putting their entire website into WordPress, um, it, the security and backups of that become a lot more important. So WordPress is very secure if you keep it up to date. But let's say you're on vacation and a new version is released, and there's the possibility that while you're sipping Mai Tais on the beach, something could happen to your blog. So that's the first part of what VoltPress does, is it protects you. It keeps you up to date. It can push hot fixes. It scans your files regularly to see if anything untoward is happening. And then the second part is it keeps just the best backups in the world. So because it's sort of native to WordPress, it keeps real-time backups. So if you make a new post or a new comment comes in, it's backed up to the cloud seconds later. And the second part is they're just ridiculously redundant. I think we store 11 copies of every single file, every version of every file forever. So it's sort of designed to be nuclear proof in its architecture. It's just completely resilient to almost any types of failures.
Right.
That's almost funny. We store 11 copies of everything forever. Does anyone ever laugh at that? It
I need that,
seems
Peter.
almost
I need
funny.
that.
No. That's brilliant.
Since we built the service, I've actually been thinking about ways I can put more stuff into WordPress because then I know it'll be backed up. Because I'm not very good about backups on my own content or my own stuff. So now I know if I get into WordPress, at least it'll be safe.
That's brilliant. Well, I'll tell you what. It's just a real treat to have you on the show, and as I say this about just what a treat it is to be a host on this show and be able to talk to people who do things that I am such a raving fan about. I've been a fan of WordPress for a very long time, and plan on continuing to develop for it in the future. And just really thank you to you and the whole team. It is a terrific platform, and thanks for your time today.
I appreciate it. I guess on a marketing show, the way that WordPress has always grown, we've never had any advertising or anything, but it's always just been one person at a time. It's, happy users telling their friends. So I appreciate you doing that yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. Where would you like to send people who would like to learn more about you?
My personal website is ma.tt, no .com or anything like that, just ma.tt. WordPress.org obviously is the home of all things open source I contribute to, and Automatic, which I mentioned earlier, is all my commercial stuff. So those are the best places to go.
What is the TT, top level domain?
It's actually Trinidad and Tobago,
Of course it
Nice.
is.
Oh,
Trinidad and
that's
Tobago.
cool.
That's
off the coast of
absolutely.
Venezuela.
That's
Absolutely
funny.
brilliant. What a coup. Matt Mullenweg, founding developer of WordPress. We are thrilled and honored to have you join us. And thanks from all of us at the Naked Marketers.
My pleasure.
That Matt Mullenweg is, he's a nice guy. He just seems like a nice, doesn't he seem like just a nice
Well,
guy to you?
yes, he does, and not just a nice guy, but a smart guy and an insightful guy. And I would
Super smart.
definitely encourage people to check out his blog because
It's
you know
awesome.
it's awesome. And you would think, hey, this is going to be a like he's going to be programming and he's going to kind of be referencing stuff over your head. But
Not at all.
yeah, he's got Jay-Z as a reference and Thomas Jefferson and just interesting
Everybody,
stuff.
everybody knows
Interesting
what they
stuff.
say about people who actually have both Jay-Z and Thomas Jefferson in
I
the
know,
same
all
blog.
the time. No, I don't.
It
Pete. Go
actually
ahead.
speaks
It
volumes.
speaks volumes, louder than words. Can I just tell you, I'm working on a project right now, and it's a WordPress project, true to form.
Of course.
It's my very first BuddyPress and WordPress 3 multi-user or the WordPress 3 network
I
installation.
can't wait to see that.
It is a great site. It's actually a migration of a Ning site. Now I don't know if we've talked about Ning before. Ning is kind of
No, we
it's
haven't.
that white label Facebook kind of alternative where you can go set up your own social
own
network. And
community.
they used to be on kind of a freemium model where you could set up a free community and then pay for add-on services. And they have eliminated the free bit. So all these people who used to be on the free network are now looking for a free alternative to Ning. And one of my friends and clients is a network that is migrating away from Ning and into WordPress BuddyPress. And I'm telling you, it is an absolute dream. There's a lot about it that's frustrating, which is just learning how how WordPress with the networked sites works. But BuddyPress in itself is really brilliantly executed. To hear Matt talk about it, it sounds almost more like a hobby
Yeah.
for WordPress. I mean, did you get that feeling?
Yeah, but I mean he's so understated about so many things that
Yeah.
it's hard to tell if that's just him being humble or if it really is kind of a side
Right.
project. Yeah, he didn't seem as enamored with the whole social platform pieces.
As
He was approaching it from a different place. He was saying, how do you get your content onto these social platforms versus like we need to be a social platform, which I thought was interesting.
Exactly, which I think is really interesting, particularly when you look at the kind of the competitive space. And so it's so funny that BuddyPress is such an interesting alternative. And I think it's worth looking at other sites who have done it really well. I mean, if you look at, I believe pro.gigaohm.com is built on WordPress MU and BuddyPress, and in terms of a marketing experience inside what GigaOhm does as its core product, it is a really terrific execution of of this open platform, and it's really worth checking out. So I've had a great time working on this network transition, and look forward to launching it so we can talk more about it.
Yeah, well, that'll be fabulous. So
So
we've already sort of incorporated our tool because
I know
we
that's our
asked Matt
tool,
to do
right?
it.
And so we'll definitely look out look for Auto in the WordPress plugin developer directory if you are in WordPress, and check out Automatic with 2 T's, actually
We're looking at
three total T's.
Simple Twitter Connect and Simple Facebook Connect, and I think I have use for both of those
Are those the
very
auto?
soon.
Those are the auto plugins.
Those look to be.
Yeah.
Fantastic, excellent. So we should give those a shot. And so yeah, I think that's the big tool of the week.
That is WordPress.
WordPress.
And
What
we're
else?
always looking for big tools, not small tools.
No, we like to really showcase big tools.
Yes. So
what else
that's
do we have
our
to talk about this
criteria.
week? What else do we have to talk about this week, people? Is this the end?
This is like the end of the show.
Feels
That's
like the end.
It
I don't
feels
know.
like the end.
I just want to say for the record, we are ahead of schedule this week. So
That's
yay
brilliant.
us.
That doesn't happen very often.
Well, way to go, Megan.
It's nice not to have
Cracking
to
the whip.
scramble. Cracking the
I'm
whip.
not cracking the whip. I'm just giving us a compliment.
Megan,
It's up to Pete and I. We'll just talk about some inane thing for 30 minutes straight and do it a week late. So thank you, Megan.
It could happen that way. Megan, if somebody would like to actually have your whip cracked at them, where would they go? Nothing? Was that okay? No? Anyone?
Wow. She's
Is this
okay.
is this thing on?
I know, and Dane's doing the hyena
She's, you
laugh.
know what?
That is
She's
so
I
funny.
think I'm gonna wait a minute. Is it the Willamette Weekly at the back pages? I think. Is that where? Am I right?
Oh,
So that would
go.
be where.com?
Okay, my WordPress website is at encouraged.com, which is INCOURAGED.com. And I am on Twitter quite a bit at Megan Strand.
And Dane, where would you like people to go for you?
Just I you know what? I don't crack whips. I hope to offer that service soon, but if you go to strike10media.com, you'll see what services I do offer.
It's a vast portfolio.
I know. I'm so excited to add whip cracking though. So we'll see.
Excellent. And I am at Pete Wright on Twitter, and I am at fifthandmain.com is my own website. About this show, you can always learn more at thenakedmarketers.com, and you can find out more about us on the Twitter at Naked Markets. We encourage you to follow us there, and make sure you subscribe to the show in iTunes. It's free, and it's the absolute best way not to miss a single solitary episode of Naked Marketing hilariousness. So thank you so much. On behalf of Megan and Dane, I'm Pete Wright, and thanks for downloading and listening to the latest episode of The Naked Marketers.